Today's lecture is radiation. Radiation hygiene studies the effect of ionizing radiation on public health and develops measures to prevent overexposure of the population. Radiation exists all around us and is in two forms, ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. What is ionizing radiation? Ionizing radiation is a form of energy that acts by removing electrons from atoms and molecules of materials that include air, water, and living tissue. Ionizing radiation can travel unseen and pass through these materials. It is on the right side of the electromagnetic spectrum in the figure below. Ionizing radiation. A familiar example of ionizing radiation is that of X-rays, which can penetrate our body and reveal pictures of our bodies. We say that X-rays are ionizing, meaning that they have the unique capability to remove electrons from atoms and molecules in the matter through which they pass. Ionizing activity can alter molecules within the cells of our body. Detection may cause eventual harm, such as cancer. Intense exposure to ionizing radiation may produce skin or tissue damage. Non-ionizing radiation. Non-ionizing radiation is a form of radiation with less energy than ionizing radiation. Unlike ionizing radiation, non-ionizing radiation does not remove electrons from atoms or molecules of materials that include air, water, and living tissue. The most common form of radiation we are all familiar with is visible light. Light is energy that originates from a source and travels through space at the speed of light. It has a particular wavelength and frequency that defines its energy. We can detect this radiation with our eyes. The only difference between various colors of light, red, yellow, green, blue, and purple, is in their wavelength or frequency, or in other words, in their energy. Red light, for example, has less energy than purple light. There is a wide range of electromagnetic radiation in nature. The visible part of the spectrum is only a tiny part of this wide range of energies. As we move down in frequency from red light, there are other familiar forms of electromagnetic radiation. Infrared, microwaves, signals from our cell phones, radio waves. These are all forms of radiation that are invisible to our eyes and that have less energy than visible light. As we move up in frequency from purple light, there are ultraviolet radiation, X-ray, and gamma rays. These are all forms of radiation with energies much higher than visible light. Definition of frequency. High rapidly waves more or up and down. The lower the frequency of the radiation, the lower its energy. Ionizing radiation. Any radiation capable of displacing electrons from atoms, thereby producing ions. High doses of ionizing radiation may produce severe skin or tissue damage. Ionization, the process of adding one or more electrons to or removing one or more electrons from atoms or molecules, thereby creating ions. High temperatures, electrical discharges, or nuclear radiation can cause ionization. Radiation, energy moving in the form of particles or waves. Familiar radiations are heat, light, radio waves, and microwaves. Ionizing radiation is a very high energy form of electromagnetic radiation. Wavelength. distance covered by one complete circle of the electromagnetic wave. In other words, the distance from one peak to another peak, or from through in one wave. The longer the wavelength of radiation, the lower its energy. Ionizing radiation are either high-frequency electromagnetic waves such as gamma radiation and X-rays, or particular as alpha and beta particles. They are derived from natural or artificial radioactive isotopes. Ionizing radiation. Waves with high frequency, you can see on this line, are very high frequency, higher than non-ionizing radiation. So high frequency, which have enough photon energy to produce ionization by breaking the atomic bonds that hold molecules and cells together, which causes psychological change in biological system. This slide also you can see the energy of the radiation shown. The spectrum below increases from left to right and the frequency rises. Sources of radiation in our environment. There are two main sources of radiation in the environment: naturally occurring background radiation and artificial sources, man-made radiation. The United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation identifies 4 main sources of public exposure to natural radiation: cosmic radiation, terrestrial radiation, inhalation and ingestion. On the slide you can see that from cosmic rays, from plants, from water, from the food we eat, and even from our own bodies, from rocks and soil and the air we breathe. So, cosmic radiation, radiation from space, sun and stars, and warm body, Earth and all living things on it. Terrestrial radiation, uranium and the decay products of uranium such as thorium, radium. Radon gas, the largest natural source of radiation exposure to humans. It exists on air, water and soil. Natural internal radiation in human body. The radiation comes from radioactive materials, occur naturally in the human body, enters the body through the food chain and breathing. What about artificial sources? Man-made radiation. Artificial radiation sources are identical to the natural radiation in their nature and effect. The most important sources are medical procedures, diagnostic X-rays, nuclear medicine and radiation therapy, consumer products, tobacco, building materials, gas, gold, consent isotopes, cobalt, cesium, and others. In this slide you can see also, for your better understanding, natural radiation accounts up to 85% of the annual human radiation dose. Nuclear weapon testing and nuclear accidents account only 1% among all man-made sources of exposure. Atomic structure. An atom consists of a small central nucleus composed of protons and neutrons surrounded by electrons. The red one are protons, blue neutrons, and black electrons. So protons plus neutrons, and they are surrounded by electrons. An atom will always have the same number of electrons as protons. 3 electrons means that it will be 3 protons. The atomic number or proton number of an atom is equal to the number of protons in its nucleus. The mass number or nuclear number of an atom is equal to the number of protons plus neutrons in its nucleus. For example, this lithium atom has atomic number 3, mass number 7. Protons, because protons equals 3, so atomic number 3. Mass number, the protons plus neutrons. Protons 3, neutrons 4, so mass number equals 7. Properties of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Position in the atom: proton nucleus, neutron in nucleus, electron outside nucleus. Nuclear notation. An isotope of carbon consists of 6 protons and 8 neutrons. This can be written as carbon 14 number of protons plus neutrons, mass number is 6 plus 8, 6 protons plus 8 neutrons, number of protons, atomic number 6, and chemical symbol is isotopes. The atoms of an element always have the same number of protons. Isotopes are atoms of the same element with different number of neutrons. The 3 isotopes of hydrogen, neutrons. Hydrogen first, second, 3 are number 1, number 2, number 3. Thus, the number of hydrogen is the mass number of the isotope. So types, classification, as mentioned, ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. So ionizing includes alpha, beta particles, uncharged particle beams, electromagnetic waves, X-rays, gamma rays, and non-ionizing radiation, electric waves, microwaves, infrared, etc. So ionizing radiation: alpha, beta, gamma, X-rays, and neutrons. Let's begin from alpha particles. Alpha particles are positively charged and made up of 2 protons and 2 neutrons from the atom's nucleus. You can see on the slide 2 protons and 2 neutrons. Alpha particles result from the radioactive decay of heavy elements such as radium, thorium, uranium, and plutonium. Because of their double positive charge, alpha particles have great ionizing power, but their large mass results in very little penetration. Even though alpha particles are very energetic, they are so heavy that they use up their energy over short distances and are unable to travel very far from the atom. The health effect from exposure to alpha particles depends greatly on how a person is exposed. Alpha particles lack the energy to penetrate even the outer layer of skin, so exposure to the outside of the body is not a main concern. Inside the body, however, they can be very harmful. If alpha emitters are inhaled, swallowed, or get into the body through a cut, the alpha particles can damage sensitive living tissue. The way these large heavy particles cause damage makes them more dangerous than other types of radiation. The ionizations they cause are very close together. They can release all their energy in a few cells. This results in more severe damage to cells and DNA. So, what characteristics of alpha radiation? Very short range, stopped by air, paper or skin, not a hazard outside the body, a concern when inside the body cause intense local ionization and biological damage. Beta particles. Beta particles are small, fast-moving particles with a negative electrical charge that are emitted from an atom's nucleus during radioactive decay. These particles are emitted by certain unstable atoms, such as hydrogen-3, carbon-14, and strontium-90. Beta particles are more penetrating than alpha particles, but are less damaging to living tissue and DNA because the ionizations they produce are more widely spaced. They travel farther in air than alpha particles, but can be stopped by a layer of clothing or by a thin layer of a substance such as aluminium. Some beta particles are capable of penetrating the skin and causing damage such as skin burns. However, as with alpha emitters, beta emitters are most hazardous when they are inhaled or swallowed. On this slide you can see how alpha and beta ionizing radiation can penetrate a piece of paper and human tissue. Alpha is blocked by a piece of paper or skin. And beta has no energy but can travel further. Beta particles emit a lower energy but can travel further distances. Because of their lower energy levels, more particles are required to cause lethal damage to cells. Characteristics of beta radiation: longer range than alpha. Low energy beta radiation doesn't penetrate the skin, whereas high energy beta can penetrate soft tissue to a depth of over 1 centimeter. Beta inside the body is a concern, but less intense than alpha. Next thing that alpha and beta you understand, so now gamma rays. Gamma rays are whiteless packets of energy called photons. Unlike alpha and beta particles, which have both energy and mass, gamma rays are pure energy. Gamma rays are similar to visible light, but have much higher energy. Gamma rays are often emitted along with alpha or beta particles during radioactive decay. Gamma rays are a radiation hazard for the entire body. They can easily penetrate barriers that can stop alpha and beta particles, such as skin and clothing. Gamma rays have so much penetrating power that several inches of a dense material like lead or even a few feet of concrete may be required to stop them. Gamma rays can pass completely through the human body. As they pass through, they can cause ionizations that damage tissue and DNA. X-rays. Because of their use in medicine, almost everyone has heard of X-rays. X-rays are similar to gamma rays in that they are photons of pure energy. X-rays and gamma rays have the same basic properties but come from different parts of the atom. X-rays are emitted from processes outside the nucleus, but gamma rays originate inside the nucleus. They also are generally lower in energy and therefore less penetrating than gamma rays. X-rays can be produced naturally or by machines using electricity. Literally thousands of X-ray machines are used daily in medicine. Computerized tomography, commonly shown as a CT or CAT scan, uses special X-ray equipment to make detailed images of bones and soft tissue in the body. Medical X-rays are the single largest source of man-made radiation exposure. X-rays are also used in industry for inspections and process controls. Gamma and X-rays. Characteristics. Both electromagnetic radiation. Gamma radiation is emitted continuously by radioactive decay. X-rays are generated in special electrical equipment by bombarding a target with electrons. Consequently, an X-ray beam only exists when a machine is on, whereas gamma rays are emitted continuously. Penetrating power of electromagnetic radiation depends on its energy and the properties of the matter through which it passes. X-rays are able to pass through the human body, but gamma and X-rays can be stopped by lens shielding. Nature. Emitted during certain nuclear processes such as nuclear fission. Great penetrating power. Produce ionization directly and can cause great harm as they pass through the body. Ionizing radiation have effects: nausea and vomiting, reduction in body's defenses, reddening of skin, loss of weight and hair, blistering and ulceration of skin, cataracts, cancer, genetic defects. Measurement. Ionizing radiation is measured in sieverts. Sieverts include a weighting factor to take into account different biological effects of alpha, beta, gamma, and neutron radiation. Exposure is controlled by dose limitation, which is based on the premise that for conditions having no safe threshold, exposure is reduced to a level where probability of harm is small. Detection. Personal, similar or very contra, personal air samples, analysis of fecal and urine samples. Protection based on 3 principles: shielding, distance, reduced time exposure. Shielding is the best method and it reduces risk positively. Distance and reduced time exposure administrative controls which require considerable supervisory control. Use of a dense medium to intercept radiation. Particulate radiation can be completely stopped. Electromagnetic radiation can be sufficiently absorbed so that emergent radiation has a reduced risk level. Barriers of lead, concrete or water provide protection from penetrating gamma rays and X-rays. This is why certain radioactive materials are stored underwater or in concrete or lead-lined rooms, and why dentists place a lead blanket on patients receiving X-rays of their teeth. Therefore, inserting the proper shield between you and a radiation source will greatly reduce or eliminate the dose if you receive. Distance protection. The intensity of all radiation is reduced by distance traveled. Reduction is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. So I think the distance you understand the far away you are, so the less radiation you will receive. Reduces exposure time and therefore reduces the accumulated dose. Units of radiation: red, and again gray. Red, the unit of absorbed dose of radiation, 1 red equals 1 bar. Orange, the unit of measuring the quantity of gamma ionizing radiation in the air, and gray, the unit of measuring the amount of energy absorbed in any substance is gray equals 100 red. Workplace examples of ionizing radiation: hospital X-ray equipment. Gamma rays are used for non-destructive testing of wells. Nuclear power generation. Limit of permissible dose. The individual equivalent dose for 1 year, which not cause any change in the health of those who work with radio sources, category A, if it's accumulated in the body in equal value during 50 years. Limit dose, the individual equivalent dose for 1 year, which not cause any change in the health of population, gate or B, if it's accumulated in their body in equal value during 70 years. Critical organs with high sensitivity: red bone marrow, gonadal tissue, internal organs, muscles, and endocrine glands. Harmful effect produced on body tissues by exposure to radioactive substances. The biological action of radiation is not fully understood, but it is believed that a disturbance in cellular activity results from the chemical changes caused by ionization. Some body tissues are more sensitive to radiation than others and are more easily affected. The cells in the blood-forming tissues, bone marrow, spleen, and lymph nodes are extremely sensitive. Remember this. Radiation sickness may occur from exposure to a single massive emanation, such as a nuclear explosion, or it may occur after repeated large exposure or to even very small doses in a plant or laboratory, since radiation effects are cumulative. Moreover, exposure to the ultraviolet radiation of the sun can cause tissue destruction and mutations that can lead to skin cancer. Radiation sickness may be fairly mild and transitory, consisting of weakness, loss of appetite, vomiting, and diarrhea. Since even in a mild dose of radiation, the blood-forming tissue is destroyed to some extent, there is a reduction in the supply of blood cells and platelets. This increases the tendency to bleed and reduces the body's defense against infection. After a massive dose of radiation, the reaction may be so severe that death quickly ensues. This is usually due to severe anemia or hemorrhage, to infection, or to dehydration. Extremely high doses damage the tissues of the brain, and death usually falls within 48 hours. Exposure to radiation can cause genetic mutation. The progeny of those subjected to excessive radiation tends to show deleterious genetic changes. Persons working with radioactive materials or X-ray protect themselves from excessive exposure to radiation by shields and special clothing usually containing lead. Processes involving radioactive substances are observed through thick plates of specially prepared glass that exclude the harmful rays. As ionizing radiation passes through the body, it interacts with the tissues, transferring energy to cells and other constituents by ionization of their atoms. This phenomenon has been extensively studied in the critical genetic material DNA, which controls the functions of the cells. If the damage to DNA is slight and the rate of damage production is not rapid, at low dose rate, the cell may be able to repair most of the damage. If the damage is irreparable and severe enough to interfere with cellular function, the cell may die either immediately or after several divisions. At low doses, cell death can be accommodated by the normal mechanisms that regulate cell regeneration. However, at high doses and dose rates, revenge regeneration may be inadequate, so that a large number of cells may be destroyed, leading to impaired organ function. This rapid cell death at high doses leads to early deleterious radiation effects, which become evident within days or weeks of exposure and are known as deterministic effects. Lower doses and dose rates do not produce these acute early effects because the available cellular repair mechanisms are able to compensate for the damage. First stage: interaction between the ionizing radiation and the body fluid. The result of that interaction is outlet of toxic radicals. Presence of oxygen stimulated these processes. Second stage: interaction between the ionizing radiation, the radicals, and the dissolved elements in the cell as protein, carbohydrate, and fats. The results are oxidations and decomposition of these elements and decrease their amount as amino acids in the cells. Third stage: disturbance of the metabolism, dysfunction of internal organs, and maybe pathological changes. Internal radiation. It is the irradiation of the human's body. or some organs or tissues from ionizing source which be located in that body. External radiation is the irradiation of the human's body from external sources. The human body is less defended than other living organisms in the nature against the influence of ionizing radiation. Industrial source is artificial or natural ionizing radiation, which usually used in scientific, medical and industrial sphere in favor of the population. Effective dose. It is the dose of hypothetical instant exposure of the body which may cause biological effect. Effective dose equals the sum of equivalent doses in internal organs. The measuring unit of effective dose is sievert. The main principles of safety radiation: sanitation, standardization and optimization. Sanitation prohibit any type of ionizing radiation if their benefit for man less than their harm. Standardization. The effect of the ionizing radiation must be less than admissible individual dose for man from all types of ionizing radiation. Optimization. Control the individual dose in low level at the time of using any type of ionizing radiation. Maximum permissible dose, a dose which must not cause any pathological changing in the body of personnel in the period of this work. Critical groups, part of the population which they received or may receive high level dosage of radiation from the source because of their age, social professional situation or the situation in their territory. Where they live, where they work, it depends on a lot of factors. In relation to the effect of radiation, the population is usually divided into following categories. According to the Safety Radiation Norms 99 in Russia, first category is medical personnel and different workers who have a direct contact with the ionizing sources. 20 microsievert in a year. At any consecutive 5 years and not more than 50 microsievert per year, 0.4 microsievert per week. Second category, category B, all personnel who have not direct contact with ionizing radiation source, as cleaning woman in X-ray cabinet, and those who live near that area, near that source. 5 microsievert per year in any consecutive 5 years and not more than 12.5 microsievert per year. Category 3, category C, all population and the personnel out of the work. 1 microsievert per year at any consecutive 5 years and not more than 5 microsievert per year. Protection against external radiation. Dose equals gamma activity multiplied time hours and divided into distance in centimeters. The coefficient of recount equals 1.8 multiplied in 10. Example, you can see the activity of radioactive cells in the laboratory, the distance of it 1 meter. Find out the admissible time for 1 week. You can find the admissible time for 1 week. It equals 3.2. Effect of radiation, internal exposure on the body, depend on the time in the body, the physical characteristics of the element, type of radiation, the amount of radioactive material in the body. The damage of the chromosomal structure, genetic effects, and formation of hydrogen peroxide. The most sensitive tissues to ionizing radiation are bone marrow, lymphatic, germinal cells of the testes and ovaries. Radiation dose effects, low exposure. Biological effects of radiation exposure can be stochastic and deterministic. Stochastic. The severity of that effect increases with radiation dose, may cause cancer and genetic effect. Deterministic occur when the radiation exposure is very high, cause degenerative changes in the exposed tissue. The main complication: infection, hemorrhage, depression of immune system, septicemia, acute radiation syndrome, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, bone marrow failure in critical period with fever, oropharyngeal correlation. Massive doses of gamma rays may cause death in few hours or days. Radiation injury, chronic exposure, cancer, mutation of chromosomes, skin lesions, signs of erythema over the aerial exposure, late complications, isotropy of the skin, and later hyperkeratosis. If we tell about sources and percentages, radiation 43%, medical exposure 20%, of gamma radiation 15%, cosmic rays 13%, food, water 8%, and others, all man-made sources 1%. So radio hygiene control to control the safety level of the radiation and to observe all instruction and the recommendation usually that work provided by the Central Epidemiological Services. So the sources are closed source of ionizing radiation. It is another classification of sources. First, it is closed source of ionizing radiation are those which do not cause radio pollution of surroundings area because of its technical particular feature as X-ray machine. The protective methods are: first, control the level of activity of the ionizing agent; second, limiting the time of work with ionizing radiation; 3, fixed distance between the workers and the source; The intensity of exposure varies inversely with the square of the distance from the source. Number 4. Using of radioprotective material. To find out the thickness of screen, to reduce the intensity of ionizing radiation by using special sanitary table, enter the formula. K. How many times weakening the activity? P. Permissible dose, and P1 the dose in fact. We divide permissible dose to the dose in fact, and equals how many times weakening the activity. And we know that protection against F radiation by using papers, protection against bent radiation by using glass or aluminum 0.5 cm thickness, and protection against gamma radiation by using lead and complex screen. Second, open source of ionizing radiation. The open sources are those which can cause radio pollution in the surroundings, for example, radio laboratory, mines, and atomic station. The open sources are two groups. First group, elements which are used in different processes, as in hospitals for treatment of cancer and for diagnostic manipulations. And second, final elements that as a result of any process, mine and atomic electrostation. The protective methods, personal protective instruments and special clothes as dressing, special shoes and masks. Second, all the methods that are used with closed sources. And number 3, proper planning of the building. The building must be content-free zones. The type of planning of the building for open sources depends on the radioactivity of that element. There are 4 groups of radiotoxic elements. In the building there are 3 zones, zone A, B, and zone C. Zone A, zone of radioactive elements, and it's the most polluted zone. The personnel are not allowed to enter this zone. For example, zone of the reactor of the atomic electrostation. Zone B, zone of overhaul, repairing, and for temporary storage of radioactive waste. Zone C, zone of personnel and workers, cabinets, workshops, filters, canteens, cloakroom, and toilets. 4. Periodic radiometric analysis, the level of radio pollution of the air, water, and solid material. And 5. Daily individual dosimetric tests. Means of decontaminations: mechanical, vacuum pump and brush, absorb, active coal, solvent, kerosene benzene, cleans, soap 40%, to form complex acid, ionic exchange method, and oxidant and alcohol. Non-ionizing radiation doesn't have sufficient energy to cause ionizing in matter and can be classified into ultraviolet, infrared, microwaves, radio waves, and laser, as you remember. Ultraviolet radiation produced by electron discharge tubes, electric, welding, and the sun can produce reddening, aging, or cancer of the skin. Can produce alpha, which causes pain and aversion to bright light. Controls protection for face and eyes, screens, non-reflective surfaces, interlocks. Infrared radiation produced by hot bodies can cause reddening of skin, burns, and cataracts. controls distance, eye protection, reflective clothing. Microwave radiation, harms caused by heating, can cause burns, controls enclosure in metal structure with interlocked access doors. Radio waves used for heating purposes, severe burns can occur by contact. Lasers can destroy tissue. Reflected laser radiation is even as hazardous as direct rays, classed from class first safest to 3A, 3B, and 4 most harmful. Class number 4 of laser is the most harmful. Controls fixed shielding, eye protection. Workplace examples of non-ionizing radiation, electric arc welding, UV, high temperatures and hot surfaces in units, infrared, telecommunication microwaves, heating units for particular industrial purposes, radio waves, precision cutting.